All right, Jason Gingold, thanks for joining me. We're continue to have these Zoom issues. So luckily I'm talking to the director of a technical center. So after this, I'm going to get some consulting tips from you, hopefully for free. So good evening, everyone. Sorry for the glitch.
All right, Jason Gingold,
thanks for joining me. Have people switching over from Facebook over to YouTube, but thanks for hanging in there. So good evening, everybody. It is April 29th. This is Tim Ash, president of the Vermont State Senate, here to talk to you about Vermont's response to the COVID-19 crisis, give a couple updates, and then have a conversation tonight with one of the state's leading educators to talk about how this crisis has impacted both the faculty and teachers, but also, of course, most importantly, the students. As we all know, schools were closed going on 6 weeks ago, I believe. And so it has been an overnight sea change, basically, for public education in these last few months of the school year. I want to begin with just two quick updates. The first is that today, Vermont reported 0 new positive tests of COVID-19, which is obviously the best report we can get in terms of positive tests. The number is well into the 800s at this point, and it's really quite striking when we look at the state of Massachusetts, one of our neighboring states that had, I believe, more than 2,000 new positive tests today, and 5 times the number of fatalities in one day attributable to COVID-19 than Vermont has had in the entire 7 or 8 week period. It does go to show that we're not an island. While the news in Vermont seems to be encouraging in terms of the progress we're making suppressing COVID-19, we obviously have very interconnected relationships to Massachusetts. And so we have to continue to be vigilant and make sure that we're controlling our own actions, but also managing our relationship with neighboring states and also with the province of Quebec. To that end, the other thing I wanted to briefly mention is that if you did not watch my discussion yesterday with Mike Pichak, who's the Commissioner of Financial Regulation, I hope it wasn't because you thought that a discussion with a financial regulation commissioner would be very boring. Mike is actually a very wonderful, down-to-earth presenter of information and is responsible for leading the state's forecasting and modeling under COVID-19. So many of the public health measures that have been adopted by the state of Vermont have been informed by the work that he has done, trying to figure out what we could anticipate in terms of hospitalizations and acute needs in terms of ventilators, things like that. But importantly, he's also going to be at the fore of the number crunching that will help determine the extent to which we can ease our restrictions in the days ahead. Among the things that he will be looking at is compliance with the existing orders that have allowed people to start slowly resuming work. And I have been observing, as has the governor, too many people who are out working under the new permissions who are not wearing masks and who are not socially distancing. And while for some it may seem like an inconvenience to wear the mask, for others they may not be accustomed to having to be vigilant about a 6-foot separation between coworkers who might be doing outdoor construction work, or painting, or landscaping. The short story is, if we do not see the kind of adherence to the public health orders, what it will mean is we're going to be more likely to see a return of a rise in infection rates. And it will mean that the governor will probably have to move slower in terms of allowing normal activities to resume. So I really can't emphasize strongly enough the need for people to really stick to the state of emergency orders, which require that employees are wearing masks in virtually every situation. So there's my, I guess, my lecture of the day, but it really is important to protect both yourself and the general public. So with that preliminary out of the way, I'd like to introduce Jason Gingold, who's the director of the Randolph Technical Career Center, RTCC, in central Vermont. So welcome, Jason.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, Jason, one of my parents is a lifelong educator, and I've come to have a deep appreciation for teachers in general. But I can only imagine what this whole experience has been like, especially coming as it did in the middle of the school year. It's not like everyone could gear up over the course of the summer and have their curriculum ready. But before we turn to how COVID-19 has affected RTCC, your students, staff, tell us just a little bit about RTCC, just to situate us before we get into a discussion about how things have changed.
You bet. So Randolph Technical Career Center, we're located centrally in Randolph. We serve 4 main high schools in the Orange County region. So Williamstown, Northfield, White River, and Randolph High School. We get a few students from U32 as far as Harwood and Lamoille. And we have 11 programs that students come to us, 11th and 12th graders, to develop a career in college pathway. And so that could be from automotive and diesel, advanced manufacturing. We're starting an electrical program next year, culinary arts, education, health careers. We really take a good look at our local region and their economic needs, and then we have those programs in place to best serve our communities. We pride ourselves on every student leaving with at least one industry recognized certificate. Last year, we earned about 400 of those as a center.
Wow.
So we're really proud of that. Students can take concurrent or dual enrollment college classes. We want students to leave with college credit, regardless whether they're making that transition or not. I would say about 65% of our students participate in what we call work-based learning. So they come to school for a few days and work in the afternoons or the mornings or a few days, and they get paid for that. So they're getting real valuable work experience, and that usually transition into a job after they graduate, which is guaranteed. And we have a 93% what we call enrollment, enlisted, or employed after a student graduates from high school, which we're really proud of.
How does that compare to typical high school?
I think it's a little higher than a typical high school. And our focus is really to work on those two options with 11th and 12th graders, developing that career post-secondary kind of training or college pathway.
And are most of your students in that junior, senior category, or are they spread all throughout the high school age range?
Just 11th and 12th graders.
Okay, so all great.
Yep.
So, obviously, you're not immune from the news in the world. And while we were in the State House starting to learn about what was happening in China, then in Italy and Singapore, all over the world, then we started seeing news out of Washington State, and we started to hear trickles, little population centers that would have some positive test cases, and we were, most Americans started to wake up to the fact that it was on our shores. At what point did you start to think, this might actually impact our school in ways that we maybe aren't so ready for? What was the sort of moment you started to appreciate that this could be coming RTCC's way?
Yeah, on Friday was Friday the 13th, Friday, March 13th, right? It was a big day where we started getting some small pieces of information. And by the time we came back to school, Monday the 16th, we had our last face-to-face in-person staff meeting. Our superintendent happened to come in that day and answer some other questions. And that was the day where we had about 50% attendance. That was the day it really hit for most schools. The next day, schools was technically closed. And we started right away on our transition plan.
Well, the governor announced, so the State House closed on Friday the 13th, probably a poorly chosen day. We should have picked the 12th or the 14th, but we closed on the 13th. And I believe it was that Sunday that the governor announced that schools had to be closed by Wednesday. So there were 2 days. And
correct.
I think the idea was that parents could keep their kids home, but didn't have to, and there could be kind of a transition.
Yep.
When the governor made the announcement on that Sunday, had there been any advance warning that came to you and your coworkers from either the Agency of Education, the governor's office, the superintendent's office?
There wasn't as much advance warning, but we had internal discussions. And I think, by Monday afternoon, we had already started to develop our transition plan to, it's not online learning, but to remote and distance learning. And what that would mean and what support systems we need to have in place. One of the things that we did was before all this started, on the last Friday of every month, we give every student a bag of groceries to take home, whether they could pick it up or not. And as we got closer to March 13th and Monday the 16th, we depleted our supplies because we thought schools would be closed for a little bit. And what a better way to send students off, not knowing if they're going to get a warm meal when they can't come back to school, was with a bag of groceries and a Chromebook. So those are the two first steps that we really started taking before we had a lot of information.
How did your instructors, I mean, what was the sort of break room teachers lounge vibe like on that Monday and Tuesday after the governor's announcement, but before things were officially closed?
Yeah, career technical instructors tend to be one of the most resilient, flexible, and adaptable groups. All of them come from some kind of industry where they've had to deal with this as an owner of a business or some kind of employee, and they roll with it. They're quick to adapt. They understand that the relationships we've built with students in quarters 1, 2, or 3 is going to carry us through this. So they're already talking to students, figuring out plans, how to make this work. So they're really resilient and positive.
Well, I believe that, but I also know that people can still be freaked out by news of a pandemic closing school, which had not happened.
Yeah.
Any trepidation about where that might leave the school year and how it might
absolutely, I think,
for the upcoming couple months?
Yeah, it's hard for teachers not to want to come into the building. It's hard for them not to want to come to work. It's hard for, the secretary who answers the phones every day and is the first person on the front line who sees students walk in the building and not want to be there and say hi to them. It's hard for our staff not to see the people they see for 5 hours a day, and that they build these positive relationships with. Sometimes, our adults in schools are the only positive mentor that a student may have in their life. And it's hard for that relationship to get severed and only see them through technology.
Sure.
I think staff are also, we have to remember as a community that teachers have families. I have one teacher who has twin boys. They're in 5th grade, and he is their teacher and his own teacher in his class. And, it's a struggle for everybody.
So you've described showing up on the Monday and Tuesday before schools were closed and developing distance plans. How much prior to the announcement on that Sunday that schools were going to be closed officially statewide on Wednesday, had your staff done any preparation for what would happen in the eventuality that there were schools closed such that there needed to be remote or distance learning?
Yep. Most of our programs are already using Google Classroom, and or on top of that, we have a curriculum with a textbook that may have an online curriculum that's already developed. And so in combination with Google Classroom, the online curriculum, I feel like we were pretty set up. And really what we implemented that we thought in order to be the greatest success was to continue the relationship building that we have with our students. So right away, we started an attendance system where if a student contacts us through email and text, Snapchat, some kind of, we know they're okay mentally and socially for their well-being, we'll count that as attendance. And we started that attendance tracker right on March 18th. The other thing that we did is VT VLC reached out and offered up a basic online kind of remote learning guidelines. And we had our staff take that as professional development, which was really helpful. And then the third thing that we did was all of our staff have implemented Google Hangouts with students. And so it's a way for this class to meet. We don't have a formal advisory, but it's a way for this class that, 12 students, 16 students that see each other 5 days a week, 5 hours a day, can get back together and make sure everyone's okay, as on top of do their daily lesson. So those things we started right away that helped us dramatically.
Well, so it sounds like the use of certain technology in the classroom was able to transition fairly, not seamlessly, but without too much disruption.
Yeah, and we started our systems, as we were giving out Chromebooks, we kept that. We wanted to know if students took home a Chromebook, do they have internet? We used all the resources that we get from the AOE on those daily memos from the superintendents and from the Secretary of Education. So automatically we were emailing out students and parents ways to get internet. We have phone trees set up. A lot of those systems we already had in place throughout the school year of how to communicate. And we mailed homework home. We set up packets. We'll deliver all sorts of things.
What is the situation for your student population in terms of internet access at home? What's the general characterization of how that has been a help or a hindrance?
Yeah, I mean, we're a rural community. It's been helpful. But, I think we also have to take a step back and remember, just because there's internet doesn't mean everyone is tech savvy.
Right.
Doesn't mean that parents are tech savvy, and not even every kid is very tech savvy. And so we hear a lot of stress from students that they're getting too many emails every day. It's too much all at one time. And so we're really trying to now to slow that process down and parse it out for them. And some students are better at paper, and some students are better at listening, and some students are better at watching. So we're really trying to meet all of their needs at the same time.
I won't tell you which one of those attributes I had, if any, but we'll save that for another day. Have any of your teachers been impacted by COVID-19 themselves? Meaning, has there been any issues with staffing your distant learning program that you've switched over to as a result of this virus?
We're very fortunate. No one in our building's been sick. We have one staff member who's been sewing fiercely and donating masks. We have a couple students who've been sewing fiercely and donating masks. We have a culinary student from our culinary program who's working with our food service department for the whole district and helping give out those 500-600 meals every day. So luckily our staff families, their extended families, are all safe as well.
Well, that's certainly
so
great.
we're grateful. It would be very difficult for us to all of a sudden find a sub for one of our program teachers to continue that learning.
Yeah, I'm imagining that at a technical career center, the course offerings don't lend themselves as easily to cross training. If you're in culinary arts, it's not so easy to do law enforcement instruction.
Exactly.
I'm winging it here with my knowledge of our local tech center. How would you say the students in general have responded? Obviously, there's tools that you've described, like checking in by email or text or Snapchat or some way to show that they're okay and communicating. That's obviously a limited check-in for attendance purposes. But what's your realistic sense about how they've responded, whether they're feeling like it's a comparable experience getting an education, whether their morale is up, those kinds of things? Yeah,
earlier, I do think we're lucky that this happened in March and not September or August when school started. It's a lot harder to build trust in student relationships through technology in the beginning of the year than when you have 3/4 of the year done. We can do different things. Our students in general are, especially the seniors. I have a senior in high school myself. They're despondent. They're sad. They're stressed. They're depressed. Some of them that already come from traumatic backgrounds. This is just compounding that for them. Some of their parents have lost jobs, or their families are sick, and they feel robbed of their last spring. There's no spring play. There's no spring sports, or as of yet.
Right.
And so it's really hard for them to digest that. We sent out, my guidance counselor did a fantastic job and did a video on grief for students and their families so that they can understand some of this process. But it's really hard for students to understand that, one, if I'm not in school, you're asking me to do school, but also for them, it's hard to justify the things that have been taken away from them. And so we're working really hard. We're waiting for that May 8th announcement from the Agency of Education to tell us about how we might be able to hold graduation ceremonies, or at least recognition nights, and celebrate these seniors and the juniors and all the work that they've done this year.
There's going to be a real need to bring closure to the final year for many students. And I almost feel like, I don't mean to, I wish the Agency of Education were a little more proactive in communicating that even if it's going to take some time, there will be an in-person graduation, even if it's at an unusual time of the year in light of what we've got to, protect ourselves against. And, obviously some things have been written off. School sports, it's just impossible to fit a whole season into a couple weeks if that was even safe. But a graduation ceremony, that's something no kid really should miss as a milestone, even if it's going to be delayed. But for all the people who do not either have a kid at a technical career center or who harken back like I do to the tech center near where I grew up, often think that it's very hands-on. You're using gadgets, computers, very manual processes and manual learning. Tell us a little bit about how you think that translates into the distant setting. Is it possible to provide the same kind of instruction without being in the physical location that they're typically in?
Well, many of our students come to us in the first place because they say they're hands-on learners, right? So that, and again, that's another reason why students are a little despondent that this isn't exactly what they signed up for. At the same time, the technical career centers are advancing, healthcare, auto technology and Prius batteries and electrical hybrid vehicles. We're advancing with today's technology probably just as fast as local industry. And we have program advisory boards, and we get great federal and state funding to really ensure that our equipment and our curriculum is up to today's industry. And that translates really well through distance learning as well. The relationships that career centers build with their students, you can watch a video, you can build this in your backyard, you can show alternative methods to do things rather than just in brick and mortar school. Is it something we transition to for the rest of the year or future years? Probably not. But there are pieces that can happen online as long as that relationship with the teacher is stable enough to, the teacher has to be creative enough to make sure that those learning standards are getting taught.
So how do the teachers, now that you said that they were quick to be resilient and just recognize the reality that was confronting them head on and start moving towards a new curriculum that wasn't in person? We're now 6 weeks in. How are the teachers in terms of morale? And almost don't even want to utter the words, but if we had to go through a whole school year like this, do you think that would actually be a drag on the ability to retain some of your teachers because it's different than what they were accustomed to, the relationship building in person, things that you've described?
Yeah, I put my faith in teachers. I don't think they'd give up or choose not to do this. I think our students might, our potential students, if we had all career centers next year had to start this way, because they come from ascending high school and they don't know career technical education as well, if they haven't started with us, it might be a little difficult to hold our enrollment. And at the same time, career centers are a wonderful place to retrain adults and students that are unemployed and help fix our economy. We already have the infrastructure in place to do that.
How far are you from Vermont Technical College?
5-minute ride.
So do you guys have any relationship there? I imagine that they have facilities that might be of particular value to some of your programs.
Yep. Some of our students from our mechanical programs, so advanced manufacturing, diesel, auto, and agriculture and nursing tend to go to VTC. We also send students to their certificate programs. And we have some articulation agreements as well. We work very closely with them on really trying to join our programming so college credits can leak down into the high school.
That's really great news. So we're about to wrap. I just wanted to maybe give you an opportunity to reflect back now. We're 6 weeks into this experience. We obviously all hope that we're nearing the end of the particular set of restrictions. We know the schools aren't opening up this year. But when you look back at this point, are there any moments that really stand out that you think that once this whole experience has come to a conclusion, which it will, that you know that you're going to look back and remember as one of the milestones that really was powerful and evoked a important memory for you?
Yeah, there's a few. Our guidance counselor made some great videos for our students to give them hope. And those are on our website, and we emailed them out to students and families. And it's just a nice collage of all our teachers. And you know, it's really tragic to see empty schools when they should be full. And so those videos were really uplifting. It's been great to see some of our students who are working full time to benefit their community, either in food kitchens, making masks, something to help save lives. We as a tech center donated all our PPE equipment to Gifford Hospital. You know, I feel good that we can contribute in that way. And we have our mental health counselor who is, you know, he has a 100 student caseload. He's got a 6-foot board in his truck and 2 chairs, and he's been going to see those students that are stuck, that are having a really difficult time to make sure they're emotionally safe and not going to do harm. So, you know, those are the things that I feel really good about, is that our community, both local and school, has really risen to this occasion. You know, our school district has a child care center for essential employees. We're feeding everyone Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And we're really trying to get past this as a community, and people have risen up to that challenge.
Well, those are all really kind of amazing anecdotes of people who've stepped up, ranging from faculty to students, working with the community. And, you know, I know I expressed the whole Senate's view that we're so thankful for all of our educators who have effectively transformed on a dime. And, you know, legislators were slow to be able to shift over to distance legislating. I'm glad to hear that distance educating was able to happen in your neck of the woods more quickly and successfully, and that you're doing everything you can to make sure students' broader needs are being met too. I think that's one of the things that people who have not been in school for a long time fail to understand, the additional demands that are on many of our public schools now in terms of a variety of human service needs that are in addition to the core educational instruction. And so I think what you've described is a combination of both, making sure they're still going to be ready to go out and either advance their education or go right into the workforce and probably get higher paying jobs than I've ever had, but also making sure their mental health needs are met. And I think we can all appreciate why that would be particularly important right now. So thank you so much for sharing some insights, and I hope you'll extend that to your staff.
Absolutely.
So appreciative.
Thank you.
So we're going to wrap for tonight. I'm going to be back tomorrow at 5:30 with Rihanna Kendrick of Groundworks in Brattleboro, which is a shelter for people who are homeless or transitioning in or out of homelessness. And they're in Brattleboro. And what she's going to really be able to share with us is how COVID-19 has put particular stresses on homeless populations, people with housing insecurity, especially as it relates to kids during this terrible time, and how they're having to be so flexible to make sure that people are both have a roof over their head, but also are safe when that's happening. So I hope you'll join me tomorrow at 5:30, and then I'll repeat my lecture from the beginning, which is to make sure that you follow the governor's order to wear masks when you're working under the new allowed economic activities. The more failure to compliance that people observe and report to the governor means that it's likely that we will be slower to ease the restrictions and putting more people at risk. So the governor, I know this governor very well personally. His goal is not to unnecessarily keep businesses shuttered. So we all have our part to do to keep people healthy and safe. But by complying, it also sends a message that we're ready to ease slowly back into more normal activities. So with that, I'll end my lecture redux and encourage you to all continue to stay safe. Good night.